Hello, America! JOC here with your ranting politics headline updates, where we are diving into today's most explosive political stories that you need to know about. Coming up, President Trump shocks everyone by considering the United States joining the British Commonwealth. Is America about to reunite with its former colonial ruler? Plus, Canada's Prime Minister calls a snap election as tensions with the U.S. reach a boiling point. And finally, a stark warning from California's Attorney General to millions of 23andMe users. Delete your genetic data now before it's too late. Stick around for all this and more in your daily dose of unfiltered news and common sense commentary. This is Ranting Politics Headline Updates. In a surprising turn that has history buffs doing a double take, President Donald Trump has signaled interest in the United States, potentially joining the British Commonwealth. Yes, you heard that correctly. The nation that famously declared its independence from British rule in 1776 might be looking to form a new kind of special relationship with its former colonial ruler. According to Newsweek, Trump shared an article from British tabloid The Sun that reported King Charles III is making what they called a secret offer to the White House for America to become an associate member of the international organization. Trump's response? I love King Charles. Sounds good to me? Not exactly the reaction you'd expect from a president who's built his brand on America first. Right-wing British MP Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK and longtime Trump ally, quickly voiced his support for the idea on X, formerly Twitter. Farage suggested that a Commonwealth with the USA would complete the alliance of the English-speaking peoples and help prevent the spread of CCP influence. He even noted that he helped launch the Royal Commonwealth Society of America back in 2017, indicating this isn't entirely a new concept. While joining the Commonwealth would be largely symbolic, it doesn't affect the governance of member nations. The timing is particularly interesting. Relations between the U.S. and the European Union have been strained over Ukraine, and according to the Daily Mail, this move could potentially help Britain avoid Trump's promised heightened tariffs on steel and aluminum. King Charles recently invited Trump back to the UK in a letter hand-delivered by British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer during his February visit to the White House. During that meeting, Trump described King Charles as a beautiful man, apparently setting the stage for this unexpected diplomatic development. If the U.S. does join the Commonwealth, it would become the 57th member of the organization, joining Canada and several Caribbean nations as American representatives in this primarily former British colonies club. But the real question remains, is this just diplomatic theater or the beginning of a significant shift in international alliances? Let's take a moment to appreciate the historical irony here. The United States, a nation quite literally founded on rejecting British authority, is now considering joining the Commonwealth, an organization primarily made up of countries that were once under British rule. That's like moving back in with your parents after a dramatic declaration that you'll never return home again. The American Revolution wasn't just a war. It was the creation myth of our nation. The Declaration of Independence, dumping tea in Boston Harbor, taxation without representation. These aren't just historical events. They're cornerstones of American identity. For nearly 250 years, America has defined itself partly by what it isn't, a British colony. Joining the Commonwealth wouldn't mean returning to colonial status, of course. The modern Commonwealth is a voluntary association focused on shared values, development goals, and economic cooperation. King Charles serves as its ceremonial head, but has no governing authority over member nations. From a strategic perspective, this potential alliance reflects a changing geopolitical landscape. As tensions with China grow and America's relationship with traditional European allies evolves, the Commonwealth offers another framework for cooperation among like-minded nations. The emphasis on preventing CCP influence, as Farage put it, reveals the move's potential as a counterweight to China's growing global power. Economically, Commonwealth membership could create new trade opportunities while potentially easing some of Trump's tariff policies. The timing is particularly notable as Britain continues navigating its post-Brexit identity and seeking stronger ties outside the European Union. Critics will undoubtedly see this as contradicting Trump's America First messaging, while supporters might frame it as smart diplomacy, strengthening cultural bonds with natural allies without sacrificing sovereignty. Whatever the outcome, the mere discussion of America joining an organization headed by the British monarch represents a fascinating evolution in the special relationship between these two nations, from colonial revolt to world wars to potential Commonwealth partners. In a dramatic move shaking up Canadian politics, Prime Minister Mark Carney has officially called for a federal election to be held on April 28th, dissolving Parliament after meeting with Governor General Mary Simon. This decision comes amid escalating tensions with the United States and what Carney has described as the most significant crisis of our lifetimes. Carney didn't mince words when announcing his decision, directly citing President Trump's trade actions and perceived threats to Canadian sovereignty as primary motivations. President Trump claims that Canada isn't a real country. He wants to break us so America can own us. We will not let that happen, Carney declared in a statement that leaves little doubt about the election's central theme. The timing is particularly significant as it follows months of growing trade disputes between the traditionally close allies. Carney, who only recently took over leadership from Justin Trudeau in March, is clearly banking on a surge of nationalist sentiment to overcome what had been a commanding lead for the Conservative Party in polls. This election effectively becomes a referendum on how Canadians want to navigate their relationship with the Trump administration. Carney, leveraging his background as former governor of both the Bank of Canada and Bank of England, is positioning himself as the steady economic hand needed during turbulent times. His Conservative rival, Pierre Poilievre, launched his campaign with a Canada First message, language that Carney quickly criticized as mirroring Trump's own rhetoric. Poilievre has countered by questioning whether Carney has what it takes to stand up to Trump, promising he would insist the independence and sovereignty of Canada be recognized. The election strategy for Liberals appears focused on economic resilience, with Carney promising tax cuts for middle-class families and emphasizing plans to reduce Canadian economic dependence on the United States through trade diversification. He's also working to unify Canada's internal market by removing provincial trade barriers, a move clearly aimed at strengthening domestic economic capabilities. What makes this particularly fascinating is watching how Canadian politics is being reshaped in direct response to American policy. Trump has effectively become the invisible candidate in Canada's election, with both parties defining their platforms largely in terms of how they would handle his administration. According to CNN reporting, this snap election represents a high-stakes gamble for Carney, who's seeking to transform what began as a temporary leadership role into a clear mandate from Canadian voters during one of the most challenging periods in U.S.-Canadian relations in recent memory. The stark contrast between Carney and Poilievre's approaches to Canada's economic future is becoming increasingly evident as their campaigns unfold. Carney is leaning heavily on his financial expertise, reminding voters of his tenure leading two major central banks. Credentials, he argues, make him uniquely qualified to navigate economic turbulence during a Trump presidency. His economic platform centers on what he calls repositioning the Canadian economy to be more self-sufficient and less vulnerable to American trade volatility. After meeting with provincial ministers, Carney announced they had reached a consensus to eliminate internal trade barriers, effectively creating a more unified Canadian market that could better withstand external pressures. Meanwhile, Poilievre's economic vision emphasizes smaller government and reduced regulation, though he's been careful to avoid being labeled as simply embracing Trump's economic policies. He's walking a political tightrope, criticizing Carney as being ill-equipped to stand up to Trump while simultaneously rejecting accusations that his own Canada First approach mirrors Trumpism. The Conservative leader has repeatedly attacked Carney's background, attempting to frame him as an elitist banker out of touch with ordinary Canadians. Today, the Liberals are asking for a fourth term in power after swapping Justin Trudeau for his economic advisor and hand-picked successor, Poilievre said, clearly trying to tie Carney to the political baggage of his predecessor. On foreign policy, the differences are equally pronounced. Carney has pledged to aggressively diversify Canada's trade relationships, reducing dependence on American markets. His plan involves strengthening ties with the European Union, rapidly expanding trade with Asia-Pacific nations, and potentially deepening engagement with the Commonwealth countries. Poilievre, conversely, has suggested Canada needs to be more pragmatic in its approach to Trump, arguing that confrontational rhetoric only worsens tensions. He's proposed cutting foreign aid, a position Carney quickly criticized as following Trump's lead. The economic stakes couldn't be higher for everyday Canadians. With exports to the U.S. accounting for roughly 75% of Canada's total exports and supporting millions of jobs, the management of this relationship directly impacts household finances across the country. Recent polling suggests Carney's strategy of positioning himself as Canada's defender against Trump might be working, with Liberal numbers climbing since the trade war escalated. However, with 5 weeks until Election Day, Poilievre still maintains advantages on issues like cost of living and housing affordability, concerns that might ultimately outweigh foreign policy considerations for many voters. My friends, if you're enjoying the insights and the independent ethos we're dishing out here at Ranting Politics, don't be a stranger. Jump into the lively conversation on X. Give us a follow at RantingRP or check us out at rantingpolitics.com and subscribe to our newsletter or stop over to our all-new YouTube channel. We're always buzzing about the next big headline and love to see your takes on the fiasco that is politics. And while you've got that phone handy, come on, I know it's in your reach. Do us a solid and tap that like and follow button on your podcast feed. Your support doesn't just boost our reach, it keeps real independent thought in the game against those giant media machines. We're also on all your favorite podcast platforms, from Apple Podcasts to Spotify and now Alexa. Hit that subscribe button for regular updates chock full of unfiltered analysis and all the news that's fit to rant about. In a deeply concerning development for millions of Americans who've swabbed their cheeks in hopes of discovering their ancestral roots, California Attorney General Rob Bonta has issued a stark warning to 23andMe customers. Delete your data now, before it's too late. The once thriving genetic testing giant appears to be on the brink of financial collapse, raising alarming questions about what happens to perhaps the most personal data one could ever share, your very genetic code. Given 23andMe's reported financial distress, I remind Californians to consider invoking their rights and directing 23andMe to delete their data and destroy any samples of genetic material held by the company, Bonta stated on Friday, signaling unprecedented concern about the security of this sensitive information. For the more than 15 million customers who have paid roughly $200 each to send their saliva samples for analysis, this raises disturbing possibilities. What happens to your genetic information if the company declares bankruptcy? Could it be sold off as an asset to the highest bidder? These questions remain disturbingly unanswered. The Attorney General went so far as to provide step-by-step instructions for permanently deleting data from the company's systems. Log in, navigate to Settings, find the Data section, click Permanently Delete Data, and confirm via email. This level of specificity from a state's top law enforcement official underscores the gravity of the situation. California's Genetic Information Privacy Act, passed in 2022, requires explicit consent for collection and use of genetic data and guarantees consumers the right to delete their information. But enforcement becomes exponentially more complicated if a company enters bankruptcy proceedings or sells off assets. This warning comes in the wake of a significant data breach at 23andMe last year, which already raised serious concerns about the company's data security practices. Now with shares trading below $2, down from a staggering $320 in early 2021, the company that once promised to unlock the secrets of your ancestry might be creating more problems than solutions for its millions of trusting customers. According to reporting from the New York Post, 23andMe's rapid expansion into drug research and pharmaceutical partnerships may have contributed to its downfall, creating a cautionary tale about the risks of entrusting our most personal information to private companies motivated primarily by profit. The story of 23andMe is a classic Silicon Valley boom and bust narrative with potentially unprecedented privacy implications. Just a few years ago, this genetic testing juggernaut seemed unstoppable, revolutionizing how everyday people access their genetic information and commanding a staggering $6 billion valuation in 2020. The concept was brilliantly simple. Spit in a tube, mail it off, and receive detailed insights about your ancestry, health predispositions, and genetic traits. For millions of Americans, The allure of discovering distant relatives or learning about potential health risks was worth the $200 price tag and the implicit trust placed in the company's data protection. But like many tech darlings before it, 23andMe appears to have overextended itself. The company aggressively expanded into pharmaceutical research and drug development partnerships, betting that the treasure trove of genetic data could be monetized far beyond consumer testing services. This strategic pivot coincided with growing public skepticism about big tech's handling of personal data. Then came the devastating 2023 data breach, undermining whatever remaining consumer confidence existed in the company's security practices. For a business built entirely on trust, with the most intimate personal information imaginable, this breach was catastrophic. The financial markets have rendered their verdict. From a share price exceeding $320 in February 2021, 23andMe stock has plummeted to less than $2 per share today, a staggering 99% collapse in value that has wiped out billions in market capitalization and left the company teetering on the edge of viability. This dramatic fall serves as a sobering reminder about the risks of our increasingly data-driven economy. When companies collecting our most sensitive biological information face existential financial threats, what happens to that data becomes a question of profound significance for personal privacy and regulatory oversight. Well, folks, that's our rundown for today. We've covered some truly remarkable developments. President Trump signaling interest in joining the British Commonwealth with Nigel Farage's enthusiastic backing, potentially reshaping our special relationship with the UK in unexpected ways. Then Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney calling a snap election amid escalating tensions with the United States, setting up a showdown with Conservative leader Poilievre over who can best handle the Trump administration. And finally, that alarming warning from California's AG about 23andMe's financial troubles, highlighting the precarious fate of millions of Americans' most sensitive genetic information. These stories share a common thread: the rapidly changing landscape of international relations, data privacy, and economic security that we're all navigating together. As always, we'll be tracking these developments closely. Follow us on X at RantingRP, on YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and check out rantingpolitics.com for more unfiltered, common-sense coverage. Remember, we don't align with political parties, we align with you, the American citizen. This is JOC signing off, and thank you, our loyal listeners, for choosing Ranting Politics headline updates. We'll be back soon with the updates you need to navigate these interesting times. Until then, stay tuned, stay informed, and as always, stay free.